life is funny and tragic, and sometimes the tragic shit is funny, and sometimes the funny shit is really sad. I wanted to write one good song to bring to the campfire, and then it ended up writing 25, and 10 or 11 are on this album, and I'm recording the second one this week. It was an exercise in survival, really. Like, how do I end the day feeling productive, challenged, and exploring these things going on with me that I know if they're not explored will end in a total catastrophe.
Lonely cattle commiserate.
Every now and again, you might come across someone who emanates a certain kind of strength and confidence. Not a chest-out, boisterous thing, but something quiet and rooted from within. Sturdiness of self. The humble sturdiness that can grow from a history of hustle, exploration, struggle, reflection, hope, and the keeping on with grit and humor through all the undulations an engaged and adventurous life will inevitably present. If they have it, that steady stoic assurance, if they have it, they don't likely care if you know it, but you will know it when you see it, and it'll put you at ease. It certainly put me at ease when I found it in Scott Ballew, after a record-breaking and unexpected winter storm on a sunny Saturday morning in Scott's kitchen in Austin, where we sipped coffee and pressed record and started talking about Scott's background and his experience as a musician and filmmaker and searcher. I've been a fan of Scott's work since discovering it, including his new album Talking to Mountains, which I found through mutual friend Jesse Woods, who produced the record and without whom Scott points out the whole thing wouldn't exist. And speaking of that quickness to recognize the contributions of others on his record and his films, and the essential nature of collaboration in any worthwhile endeavor, Scott maintains a sense of humility and gratitude related to what he's accomplished and made available to us all, specifically calling out those who've had a direct impact on his recent work, folks like Jesse, the Malloy brothers, Austin Leonard Jones, JT Van Zandt, Todd Hannigan, Will Patterson, Jack Sanders, Ryan Bingham, Terry Allen, and others. Scott's experience is wide and deep and varied. A former Division I running back, a recovering addict, a brother, a son, a talented filmmaker, and more recently, as mentioned, a musician, songwriter, and singer. On that morning after the storm, Scott was nice enough to let me into his home and to indulge the enthusiastic projections of an earnest fan. A premise, that of having fans, that he can't seem yet to fathom. But I'm sure he'll be getting used to it as more of the world discovers what he's created. So here goes with Scott Ballew. Forgive the audio quality at a couple spots. My mic gave out, unfortunately. Time to upgrade my battered equipment, I guess. But hey, doing what we can while on the move out here headed west. And thankfully Scott's audio comes in crisp and clear throughout. And please do yourself a favor and check out Scott's album Talking to Mountains, along with his documentary on West Texas singer, songwriter, artist, legend Terry Allen, called Everything for All Reasons, and also his library of short film work created with Yeti, all of which we touch on in this conversation. Thank you, Scott, a million times for putting your work out there, and thank you for being on the show to talk about it. And thank you, listeners, as always, for tuning in to the Jalapeno Podcast. This is Ty, your host, and here we go with Scott Ballew. What's up, Scott?
How you doing?
Ty.
Good to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Welcome back to Austin.
Yeah, thanks.
What a week.
No kidding, man. This is wild.
I just couldn't get to them. I couldn't get out. So
Yeah.
it doesn't sound that crazy if you're tuning in from Alaska, but it was more of a crisis than I think people acknowledge, and I think that the carnage and aftermath is still unclear. With just, I'd imagine there's, homeless folks, old folks, a lot of people that didn't have the resources that we had, or, family members to go and stay with that lost their, didn't have cell phones or lost, cell phone capabilities on Monday and just froze or starved or, so it's been kind of tragic, and it's just unsettling for a full week. rich or poor, you're just sitting there like, all right, is today the day that a tree falls on my house or
Right.
all my pipes burst?
Yeah.
I think it's just been an odd week.
Yeah. Humbling.
For sure.
Without power, without water, without electric, where you're kind of confronting the humbling aspects of nature, without the resources and without the roads being cleared. And when we were supposed to initially talk, I couldn't get here. Or if I did, it would take like 4 days.
Never even crossed my mind that was an option. Like, but then you think about it, like, oh yeah, why would Austin have snowplows?
Yeah.
And fucking like, why would they have just shacks full of salt, like
Right.
Jackson, Wyoming? I don't think it's ever been. We haven't seen a week like this as long as I think in 100 years maybe.
So, did you grow up here?
Yeah.
Nice. So you've tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up 15 minutes from where we are now, in a little neighborhood called Lost Creek that my parents are still at.
Nice.
Like, just, very simple, old weird 70s and 80s architecture with limestone and it was a great, like, right our backyard was a green belt before the green belt kind of became like littered with Monster Energy and Kid Rock. It was just like a place where we'd go and we could go down there every day after school until dark without a concern. Super outdoors, and then a lot of sports. I had 3 brothers, so we had like a yard big enough to beat the shit out of each other and play football and baseball, and like that was kind of
nice.
That's what you do in Texas.
Yeah. Where'd you fall in the order?
I was the oldest.
You're the oldest of 4.
4.
Nice, man. All boys.
All boys. Yeah,
I
it was
love
a
that.
zoo, and we lived in a neighborhood. There's probably 60 kids
Nice.
within our age range. Well, so I lived here till college. I played football and went to University of Washington in Seattle to play football.
Oh, cool.
And that was kind of like one of those moves. It's like, what's the farthest point on the map from Austin? And it was Seattle. And of course, I'm not too embarrassed to admit it, but like Pearl Jam, like Nirvana, like that whole thing was what was going on in middle school and high school. So all of my information and inspiration to move to Seattle and play football was based on a 15-year-old idea of what Seattle was really like.
Yeah.
And I went there for 2 years. Didn't like Seattle at all. Didn't really like football at all. And transferred back to University of Texas.
Wow.
Took a year off from football. Drank and smoked a lot of cigarettes and kind of made up for lost time. And then walked on my senior year.
Wow.
And UT recruited me in high school, and my dad played at UT, and there's like this weird love-hate thing going on with UT, but the guys that were supposed to be starting at my position, which was running back, one was in jail and one was ineligible for grades, so the coaches were pretty much, hey, I don't know what kind of shape you're in, but we heard you're back in Austin and there might actually be a chance.
Wow. Good for you.
So I like stopped smoking cigarettes and went and worked out for like 2 weeks and played my senior year. And it was, I didn't play much. What happened was a true freshman came in named Jamal Charles, and he was really fucking good. But back to your alma mater, that was the year that we played USC in the championship with Vince Young and everything.
Dang. Jeez.
So, of course, I didn't see the field that game, but that happened. That was a fun experience. And then moved to LA the following year.
Cool. Yeah, I was amazed by Jesse and you too, like so nonchalantly saying you played at the best possible level for your for where you could have been at that age.
Well, I think that was our connection, instantly, because we were both the guys. I don't know if you've been in a NFL or Division I locker room, but there's not a lot of, people wearing Huarache sandals listening to Bob Dylan or Townes Van Zandt. So Jesse and I definitely stuck out, and we're like, there's definitely some like Dazed and Confused or North Dallas 40 things going on, where it's like we were born in Texas. That's all we did. We didn't grow up in the mountains. We didn't grow up in the ocean.
Right.
Didn't grow up riding bulls. Like football, if you had any sort of ability or focus, or your heroes they were athletes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, your soul or anything that connects. So I think we were in this weird world of like, yeah, we can do this, but I think we just did it because that's what our friends did. Mm-hmm. And they paid for college. Yeah, when we met, he moved to Austin after he was done playing at A&M and I was done at UT, and we both were like, oh yeah, that was kind of the thing, the oddball.
Yeah.
Ex-athletes. And I feel like so much of our story from then has just been an effort to kind of shed that sort of jock stigma, which is, I'm definitely not embarrassed by it, but I definitely don't identify with it either. But when people learn that about me or Jesse, my dad still doesn't believe that Jesse played football. It's funny. It's funny when people realize that. I think there's a chip on the shoulder, probably from all of that, and maybe this barrier to identifying as an artist. It's like we talked about that in a long time too. Yeah. Obviously, Jack is a baseball player, love baseball, and I think it's one of these things like Texas mixed with sports, mixed with, it's not like we grew up in Berkeley or Ojai where that sort of creativity was encouraged. Right.
Right.
Like it was hunting and football.
Sure.
I was definitely a free spirit and conscious of that. I never wanted that to define me, and I never wanted that to be the greatest moment of my life. We played in 2 state championships, national championship. I remember, this is probably the coolest thing I've ever heard a coach say, but Mac Brown came in the locker room after we beat USC, and the first thing he said, he goes, he shut off all the music, shut off all of the bullshit that was going on, and he's like, don't let this be the best thing that ever happens to you.
Amazing.
And that's hands down the coolest thing in sports I've ever heard. And like I think I was aware of that, and all of our middle school coaches were these, Uncle Rico types that couldn't give it up, all of the
throw the ball over the mountains.
There's this thing that I was aware of, that if that was your identity, your ability only lasts so long, but it was a good experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're aware of that, of your varied interests. You mentioned Pearl Jam. That Pearl Jam was my first concert. Brother and his buddies were like, I looked out the window of our house and they're congregating around a car, getting ready to do something, and I sensed adventure. And as they were pulling out, I ran out and jumped in the back of the Suburban and went to my first ever summer concert, and it was all time. And I still Eddie Vedder is still an inspiration.
He said, he's like, it's hard not to like him. I think there's plenty of pretentious elitist artists who will shit on Pearl Jam or the whole grunge scene, but in quarantine I've watched so many damn movies. I rewatched the Cameron Crowe 20-year anniversary of Pearl Jam. Great. It's still like, there's a picture. One of my favorite. There's the year I moved to LA. One of my best friends in college, who we connected from a Pearl Jam fanboy. Yeah. And we saw their first acoustic show at Benaroya Hall. We were there. Anyway, his family does all of the trash and recycling for Seattle and that part of Washington, and they do it for Safeco Field.
Mm-hmm.
So the most elaborate plan was put in place for him to meet Eddie Vedder, but via the Mariners and Safeco Field, and they were going to sponsor an Earth Day festival and try to get Pearl Jam to headline.
Mm.
So he's like, hey, I think it's going to happen, but in order to kind of schmooze them, we're going to play home run derby at Safeco Field with Eddie. A couple members of the band, this guy Matt Vaughn that owns Easy Street Records. And he's like, you have to fly up tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I took a day off work and flew up and played home run derby with Eddie and 6 other people with the Mariners bullpen pitching to us. And
get out of here.
We get wasted in the dugout off tequila and a keg, and then go into the owner's box and watch the World Series. And I was just in the corner, just like cross-eyed by the end of the night. And Eddie was pretty close too, but he was just having such a good time.
Yeah, man, that big inspiration. That concert I went to made the fanhood kind of immortal in my book, because like, yeah, they played Black or
and you let the audience sing
let the audience sing, but also everyone had their lighters out.
Oh yeah.
You know, in this sea of lighters, and I was transported. But I had closest I ever got to him was somehow my friend, his aunt worked for something in Boston that was able to get us backstage when they played, and we went back there, and we went into like the green room, and I didn't actually meet Eddie Vedder, but I saw him maybe from here 20 feet away, and he, you know, he's kind of in his own world, but the one thing I witnessed in person other than him on stage was he was speaking with one of the security guards, a woman, a employee of the venue, and he gave her, I couldn't tell what he gave her, but he handed her something. He said, "Thank you for all that you do." And that was it. And I was like, it was so cool to see that, because that kind of energy is what I've always sensed in him. And then to see him do it when no one's around, and it was just a little moment, and I was just really grateful to have witnessed that, at least. So that's amazing. You got to do BP, and how did that go?
Dude, it was classic. It was, I mean, I hit a ground rule double, and my buddy hit a home run.
Nice.
And Eddie, I guess my buddy saw him a couple years later somewhere in Seattle, and Eddie's like, "Dude, you're the guy that hit the home run at Safeco." My friend still talks about it. He has that picture on my fridge framed, like the size of that Cool Hand Luke poster that's in his office.
Yeah.
It's fucking classic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard nothing but nice things about Eddie, and through, you know, he's a big surfer, and through some of my surfer friends and the Jack Johnson world, just heard nothing but like what a genuine and just generous guy he is.
Yeah. So speaking of that, for you, for music, was music always part of it, or where did music come in for you?
As a fan?
Yeah, or both. Music as a fan and music as a creator.
Music as a fan, it's always been there.
Yeah.
For sure. You know, I grew up in Austin.
Yeah.
Like you said, we didn't have, like, it was football and Mexican food and Willie Nelson. And that was our only identity, really. My dad played football at Texas in the 60s, and their coach, Darryl Royal, was best friends with Willie and Charlie Pride and, like, all these, like, pre-long hair Willie.
Yeah.
Like when Willie, just before the whole outlaw movement.
Right.
And there were golf tournaments they would play in. Willie would come in with Charlie Pride and play in their locker room. There's just these little, you know, get-togethers at the Broken Spoke. So all of that was clear in my mind, but it didn't register how unique that was or how good Willie was. Yeah. I think it's like the classic rock radio stations. You hear On the Road Again or a couple of his hits, and you're like, man, you know. And that was definitely blaring in my dad's Bronco growing up. But I was, you know, you don't grow up listening to what your parents listen to.
Right.
So it was definitely an evolution of going from, like, you know, I think the very low-hanging fruit that you're introduced to in middle school or high school of Led Zeppelin or Bob Dylan or Pearl Jam for our generation, Nirvana, Soundgarden, that kind of led into, it started out there, and then it kind of found my path more of like the singer-songwriter types, and was introduced to Townes Van Zandt after that, and then that kind of just honed in on a path for me as a listener in my 20s and 30s. But I mean, in terms of creating, I had a guitar in my 20s, but I mean, I maybe knew 3 chords, and it was like just one of those things that everyone had in the corner.
Yeah.
I wanted to. I mean, the reason when I moved to LA, I had no idea what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I had no background in anything. I just knew I didn't want to work in Austin doing commercial real estate or insurance or something. And that's where Jesse and I's like worlds first connected.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, you're really good. I was like, I'm not, but I think I can hustle. Like, I can get to LA, and I'm not afraid to meet people or ask for things or try to figure out. So my very simple idea was, I'll manage you, slowly pick up some more artists. Maybe we'll start a record label and we'll get, we'll be famous. Like, going back to Pearl Jam, I was like, I'll be Kelly Curtis. Like, that's the closest thing to like a music career that made sense to me. But it wasn't that simple. I think Jesse moved out, lived on my couch for a little bit, played a couple shows in LA, somehow played Austin City Limits Music Festival. But his money ran out. He moved back to Austin. My money ran out. And I started working in films just to survive, and started PAing and worked on like Entourage and a Ben Stiller movie called Greenberg. And that kind of just like one thing led to the next. And I was like, oh shit, this is like my career now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But music was, I mean, that was Jesse, like, that was the closest thing I came to thinking that I would be in the music industry, was that year that we were kind of hustling, trying to get things done. Yeah.
So then how did it go from that to Talking to Mountains?
Man, let's see. I'm 37, so that's a 16-year, let's say 15-year evolution. I mean, I think it's just been a series of survival, like take the next opportunity that is interesting to me and see what happens next. So the music thing with Jesse, when we were 23 or 24, didn't work out, and I started PAing, and I wouldn't say that I actually loved the work, but I loved the idea of creating something and being, on a team, making movies or TV shows. And it was just like, it was so foreign to me, growing up in Austin with the emphasis on college and degrees and sororities and fraternities and like Tahoes and all these things, that I'm now working with, dudes with neck tattoos that didn't go to college, that like,
right,
live on the beach in Venice, and it's just like, it's the last carnival.
Yeah.
Like the film production, it is like a traveling circus. And I was like, you can smoke cigarettes while you work and wear whatever the fuck you want to work. I was like, this is great. It was definitely like one of those things that it was about the adventure for a while, and traveled around, doing movies, and slowly just, 3 or 4 years of doing like the production assistant work, and then production coordinating work, and then production managing work. And it's just like, I think survival, like, oh, that person makes more money than I do. What is he doing?
Yeah.
And then just learn how to do that. And then it morphed into producing commercials. And that was a lot of fun. And it was, and I fell in with this couple companies. The first one was called Bandito Brothers, which was like a outdoor, action. Their specialty was action, car commercials. They did a documentary called Dust to Glory about the Baja 1000. So it was like that kind of like Baja community of like, you know, just greasers that lived in Airstreams and drove Porsches and, you know, were stunt drivers turned directors, and it was all pretty exciting. And that somehow that transitioned into working at a company called Farm League, which was like the first kind of like, you know, the group that I was like, all right, these are my people. And a guy named Tim Lynch and Chris Malloy started that company and brought me in maybe when I was 28 or 29.
Yeah.
And was producing for Chris Malloy, who I wasn't, you know, I grew up in Texas. I didn't know who surfers were.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen any of Chris's surf films when I started. But he had, you know, he grew up in Central California and grew up kind of in a ranching community and had by this time reverted back to the same ranching community and had gotten some land and some animals and sustainable living type thing. But he saw me in like this fancy kind of cool hip, you know, Venice office with all of these hip type of skinny jean ad people, and I just had a big dip in my mouth, and he saw it from 3 rooms away. He's like, what are you doing? Who are you? Do you want to work together?
Nice.
And so that's how that started pretty much.
Wow. Yeah, the Instagram, social media gets a lot of flack for being a negative thing, but for me, it has opened up worlds in a great way. One of them, I don't know how I found it, but Farm League, I've been following that for a long time, and I always thought it was so cool. The Malloy brothers, same story. Tangential thing, I want to say through Instagram. Yeah. You know, all these things in this world that I didn't know of, or, you know, not people that aren't necessarily, you know, broadly well known.
He's just such a creative person. That kind of one of those things that everything he touches, there's a very unique kind of thumbprint on it, and I've learned a lot from him on how he approaches things.
Sure. Yeah, I've been thinking about this idea a lot lately, about how the choices that you make in your own world, your own life, you know, who you choose to be, how you choose to be, and sort of building a life that is an example of what you believe in, your values, your interests, your tastes. And how cool it is in the Malloy brothers, and in you, I think it seems like are doing this as well, is you're sort of speaking for what you believe in through what you do and how you create a life that works for you on your own terms. And I feel like they're really doing it. And Terry Allen, and you guys capture that in your films about him, is he's a person who has been steering his own ship on his own terms from a place that is within, you know, seemingly directed by an inner voice. And it's not about being famous or even successful. It's about listening to the inner drummer, so to speak. And it's so inspiring to see that in any fashion, but particularly when the outcomes are so beautiful and so inspiring. And yeah, those guys seem like the real deal as people, let alone whatever comes out of their work.
Well, I've learned a lot from both of them, and they come from 2 totally different worlds. But I think the common thread, Chris and I talk about this a lot, and Terry's the best example. He's like, you know, whether it's a film or a song or paintings, like, I think Chris is his you know, some of the things that we've always discussed are just like, if the times he's found success is when he's made it for one person, you know?
Yeah.
You're not trying to please everyone. You're not trying to follow some trend. You might be 30 years behind or ahead. It doesn't really matter. He's like, but he's like, the thing I've learned is like, the stuff that has worked for me and has felt true to me and interesting and unique is like, I've made it for one person. Yeah. Sometimes that's me. Sometimes that's my wife.
Yeah.
you know, and I definitely identify with that. And I think there's a lot of things that I've done, and you know, where you're not trying to chase it, and you're like, all right, I've got this person in mind. If you know, if this person doesn't smell bullshit, then maybe a couple people will like it.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely, for what it's worth, sense that in your album, in Talking to Mountains, was that it was very much from the heart, and you kind of let us into your world in a way that I was totally sold on from the get-go. It sounds real. It's hard. The word authentic gets thrown around a lot, but that genuine honesty I felt in your music, and I feel in your music, and it seems like you've been through some stuff that you were expressing, you know, beautifully in the album, and it's a hard line to walk of being that vulnerable and expressing pain without being melodramatic and without being, you know, woe is me, you know, and I think that you did that really well, of sort of oscillating between this pain and kind of despair, but also this humor and not taking yourself too seriously about it. But you're also not taking it lightly. You know, you're taking your life and your experience seriously, and you're expressing that, but you're not taking yourself seriously. And I think that is very human and honest, and the result of that is that it pulls me, a stranger, into it in a way that I feel very connected to, and wanted to commend you on that for what it's worth, from a measly fan.
my one fan. No, it's still bizarre. Even, I mean, I haven't even thought about this. It's such a new thing, a new like expression. It still doesn't seem like it's like a real thing, you know? Like the music stuff. So I don't even know how to. I mean, I don't think anyone can analyze their own stuff. It's kind of like it was stuff that, you know, represented a certain time in the best way I could do it, and it was I mean, going back to doing it for one person, or like guys like Terry, or John Prine, or Michael Hurley. I think I've always been interested. Same thing with films. Like, if something can get me to laugh and cry in the same sentence, like that's what life is. I very much feel like that, because I have the tendency to be super dark, you know, naturally. With you know, it takes a lot of contrary action and effort to combat that. And it's like, you know, I'll spend 2 hours every morning reading Stoic philosophy stuff, you know, Jim Harrison poetry, like, all right, there's, you know, I don't wake up and hop out of bed and just you know, immediately think this is going to be a good day. But I also recognize that that's like crippling. It's a crippling attitude, and you know, there's tools that we have that can combat that. So I think, I don't know, any sort of films or art that I gravitate to, and definitely, you know, trying to craft these songs, the goal, and maybe it wasn't intentional, or is try to capture that sort of dichotomy of, like, you know, life is funny and tragic, and sometimes the tragic shit is funny, and sometimes the funny shit is really sad, and it's like a lot of it's out of our control. Most of it, you know. So I've had good mentors, and I also had like kind of a terrifying, now that I think about it, a terrifying and group of editors. You know, it's probably been a year and a half that I've been writing these songs.
Mm.
And as you can imagine, there's probably a few in there that aren't worth recording, getting to that process. And the people that I trust to give me feedback are people that probably who I shouldn't have been sending it to.
Mm.
You know, it's like Ryan Bingham and Terry and JT Jesse, and you know, looking back on it, I could have. It'd have been easier on my ego to send them to my mom first. But with their, you know, and all of them have been super sweet and encouraging, and even the terrible shit, I could just tell by their lack of react. Like, you know, you can tell by the silence sometimes what to work on.
Yeah.
And you can tell. I remember sending one I was really excited about to Terry once. It was like the 7-minute. I just drove back from Wyoming. I was listening to this book on tape about the Texas Mexican Revolution, and I wrote the 7-minute fucking meandering, you know, song about somehow related to the Mexican Revolution. And Terry is like, I really respect what you're trying to do there.
Yeah.
With an emphasis on trying. And then he goes, just keep in mind, most revolutions aren't that long.
Right.
And I was like, God, you're right. And deleted that one. And it's just like, you know, it was a series of that for 6 months to a year before I finally got one that I sent out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like immediate, like, this is good. It was the first time it was like, hey, there might be something here.
Yeah.
And that was enough. That was enough to give someone who's stuck in quarantine the confidence. It's hard, like, anyone would be lying if, at this point in civilization, if some aspect of their art is an influence or derivative of something else.
Oh, sure.
You know, and my heroes and the people I listen to are pretty consolidated at this point.
Yeah.
You know, there's 10 people that I have on heavy rotation. And
who are those?
I mean, it's Terry. I mean, for 3 years, even before meeting him, it was Terry.
Yeah.
Juarez was on my record player
all the time.
Without taking the minute that was re-release, I was just like it was just so refreshing. And it was, you know, I was moving from LA back to Austin, and it gave me this sense of pride again, to going back to the whole, you know, artist, athlete, Texan, you know, hit whatever. Hearing Terry around that time of moving back to Texas gave me this boost of pride to be from Texas and to wear cowboy boots and to be creative and to be free and to be exactly who I am. And there's just never been a record, and maybe it was the timing in my life when it was re-released, but I feel like there's a lot of folks that got turned on to it at the same time that affected. And it was just like, you know, it was, like I said, it was like John Prine, but like a Southwest kind of like weird combination of folk, country, you know, Zydeco, like, you know, it was like, I don't even know what, you can't categorize it. So I liked that aspect of it, and I loved his piano, and I loved his accent, and it was just so compelling. Yeah. And those years that when it was released, I mean, I was on the road for 3 years straight for my day job, and it was driving from, you know, Pagosa Springs to Jackson Hole to, you know, Columbia Falls, flying to Mexico, going to Iceland, you know, being at the top of Denali, and just seeing, you know, a lot of time in the Southwest, Taos and New Mexico and Terlingua, like, you know, all these places that you just, unless you've been there, you can't. And music, you know, music just totally making that experience something else. So driving, I had that album on anywhere I went, and it was just like something, as a filmmaker and someone that responds to things visually, it was just like, it was that thing that's just where all the elements clicked.
Yeah, man. I mean, you've referenced a few we're on the same page in terms of some of the names you're referencing, including the Stoics, including Jim Harrison poetry in particular, and just him. He's kind of like a Terry Allen type. He's no longer alive, but his biography, Off to the Side's amazing. If you haven't read that,
I haven't.
Autobiography. But yeah, man, and I'm not from Texas, not from the West. As a kid, I wanted to be a cowboy, probably like most kids, but had a similar experience of driving out here and listening. Similarly, finding Juarez somehow a few years ago, and then when I saw your documentary, I was like, thank God someone made something like this, because I didn't know really much about him, other than that he was kind of a Renaissance man. And but yeah, driving around those parts of the world, and on this trip, I'm like targeting some of the towns he references, like the Wolfman of Del Rio, and this fall driving throughout Colorado and New Mexico, and it adds an element to this like kind of fairy tale-ish experience of a place, and then you combine that, like you said, with the visual that his words and sound creates, and it's just a beautiful way to experience a place and to create a little universe as you're going down the road.
I can think of three specific ones, and this was prior to meeting him.
Yeah.
I remember I was going to visit some friends in Pagosa Springs and was going to fly from Denver to there. Big storm hit, and I couldn't get out of Denver, so I rented a car and drove 6 hours to head southwest. And halfway through it, I don't remember what town, but I was just going in the middle of nowhere in this amazing, mountain pass, and it was sunny, but it started snowing, and Cortez Sail was just blaring, and it was like, the Colorado rain on the California glass.
Yeah.
There's so many instances. I remember having, there's a similar one. Right after a breakup, me and one of my closest friends did a little New Mexico road trip, and same album on, heading into Espanola from Chalma, New Mexico, and we pulled up this taco shop, and it was just like, there's like a 15-year-old kid with track marks all down his arms, nodding out at this table, attempting to eat tacos, and it was just like all the things, the death, the murder,
sure,
the dinginess of, the extreme beauty of New Mexico, and just the poverty and the drug, all this thing was. And then there's another time, different breakup. It was around the time I met Ryan Bingham, and he's like, dude, I gotta go play this show in Marfa for this little thing, and you should come with me. And I was the designated driver, and Ryan had a cooler in the front seat, and we took all these back roads. Like Ryan's, lived in some interesting places along the border in Texas, and was bull riding. So we went through all these roads to eventually pull up into Marfa at midnight, and we stopped at Marfa Lights.
Nice.
To let him finish the last few beers, and we listened to Juarez twice, back to back, with him singing on the hood, both of us, word for word. It was one of those experiences that was still gives me chills.
Yeah.
And then Ryan eventually, when we started doing the series, his I was like, who should be the first guest? And we kind of threw out some names. He's like, well, I know Terry Allen. I'm like, the fuck you do? Yes. So that's kind of how all that started.
Amazing, yeah. I love that whole album too. I have it on repeat. And La Despedida, that the first part of La Despedida, where that El Paso rain is rising up to, trying to catch some of that Texican blue, and then this line, just like me and you, just passing on through.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could listen to that piece till Kingdom Come, dude. Man.
His best line is in that song, when her what is it? When her beauty touched the good times.
Yeah.
When love was just an act all alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's it right there. But yeah, Terry, I mean, he's been so ingrained in all of this process, and probably the first song I really tried to write was when we were making that first film with Ryan and Terry. He was telling the story about him and Guy Clark and their wives in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this, you know, Mexico City's beautiful and pink and blue, all these colors, and there's some building, and Guy was like, that's a cool looking building, and
yeah.
Terry's like, yeah, but it's the wrong kind of blue. And Guy's like, that's a song.
Yeah.
And Terry went in the stories like, we tried to write the song and
Wow.
never did. And cut to me coming back to Austin. My girlfriend moves in with me from LA. She's a musician. I get a piano for her, and she like between her and just listening to Terry, I started trying to learn piano, and that phrase is in my head, and it's like very simple progression, but I wrote a song with that as kind of the hook, or a version of that as the hook. And I never in my wildest dreams when I was doing that thinking that it would be on an album. And that's the recording that's on the album is from this piano with my shitty like
right here
SM57 mic. And I remember like just sending it to Terry. I was like, hey, with your blessing, I did this. And
good for you, man.
He was like, go for it. I like the song. I like your voice. And I was like, that's all I needed to hear to try another one. Yeah.
Well, a couple of things. Back to that reminds me of the Pearl Jam 20 documentary, and when they found Eddie Vedder, and there's that clip where they're like, this is the guy, because he's not trying to sound like anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, his voice is like they reference like the aggression in his voice. Whereas they were getting all these tapes where people are sort of imitating other sounds. But Eddie Vedder was Eddie Vedder, and in testament to you, your voice is your voice. And
sorry.
No, but I think that's what gives it the sense of realness, and the endearment to it is a result of that, because the imperfections of any work of art are, you know, the wabi-sabi of what draws you into it. And part of what makes Terry's work so interesting is you're like, oh, that's him, that's his inner world that he's creating. And for me, those are the types of films, paintings, songs, poems that I'm drawn to. And you mentioned John Prine, and that it was interesting because I was thinking about this conversation, having listened to your album, and that name was coming up for me as well, particularly country song. You know, I was like, oh, this could have been a John Prine song.
2 p.m. at Chuck E. Cheese, a draft beer and a divorcee. If skee-ball tickets could pay the bills, and whack-a-mole could crush my pills, be a pretty good life, I'd say. Not bad for a holiday. I hear some crying, but it's not my kid. Mobile home.
You know, and it is that the ability to capture the entirety of a human experience of joy, pain, confusion, inquiry, wonder, despair. You know, you have the line, wondering if we'll meet when I get better. You know, such a beautiful line in terms of suggesting something without telling you why. What are you getting better from? And then you say, wondering if it's better not to wonder at all. And you know, you're asking these questions to yourself, and then expressing it in the form of a song. And it's a beautiful way to go about it. And Prine does it, Terry Allen does it, Warren Zevon, I don't know if you're a fan of him, but his songs are loaded with that kind of stuff, where it's this pain challenge, but it's also this hope. and this trust in yourself, confidence in this uncertainty that we all deal with if we're at all observant of our own lives. And I sense that throughout your work, and it's really great. And it's cool that you've been able to do it. I saw JT's Instagram post where he referenced that you sort of taught yourself guitar and piano relatively recently. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I got guitar lessons for a couple months in 7th grade and learned like G, D, and C and knew like Wish You Were Here and Redemption song type of thing. And they got me through as long as like in my 20s. And then at some point, I learned my staples around the fire were In Spite of Ourselves and Dead Flowers.
Yeah, sure.
Same chords, but just like awkwardly strumming them, and really bad impersonations of John Prine, to the point where no one passed me the guitar on the campfire. And actually, I mean, that's kind of the impetus of all this. Yeah. Actually, is we started going, the Malloys and Ryan Bingham and our friend Graham Goodfield has this company called Los Padres Outfitters, and we go once a year or twice a year. We do these pack trips where we load up a bunch of horses and mules and food for 3 nights and go into the Sespe Wilderness or Los Padres Forest or somewhere in Central California and go camp, and it's such a blast. And the highlight is always sitting around the campfire at night.
Yeah.
And we have Ryan Bingham, who is pretty damn good. And but everyone else was too. Keith Malloy writes songs and is really good and sings some killer, George Strait covers and some original songs. Dan Malloy is like got such a sweet like original good voice and has written some good songs. Our friend Kellen writes songs. Pretty much, we pass around the guitar for a couple hours every night, and it's clear which direction the guitar was being passed, and it started to hurt my feelings. That it was never passed to me.
Yeah.
And it was because I was terrible. Yeah. And really terrible and a little competitive. Like how are these guys doing that? Yeah. Shit, like that was a good song. Like how did he do that? And then I'd get to my John Prine cover with like some fake twang, and it was just like, all right. Mm-hmm. But really, I started writing songs so I would have one to bring to the campfire.
Cool.
And really honing in on, the people who were patient with me, Dan Malloy, Chris Malloy, JT, pretty much did the same things. Like, like maybe you should try it without like the twang, or how do you sound when you're just talking type, it was like, it was clear in their nicest, most patient way. And again, this was not them encouraging me to make a record.
Yeah.
It was them like, all right, if you're gonna do this, like, why don't you try to find your voice. And that became like kind of the thing to focus on when I was practicing. And JT taught me a couple of town songs, like the Travis picking, like verbatim, and like that kind of opened up. Not that that's my style or that I nailed it, but that like made me a little more familiar with the guitar and some Lightning Hopkins licks. And then my friend plays the guitar in this band, Jamestown Revival, that opens and plays with Ryan Bingham a lot. And he lives in Austin. He came over and just gave me like...
They're great.
We would just play like for a couple days, and it was the first time I realized, oh, you're not like how to transpose chords or to use a capo. Like, okay, I can't sing this song in C. What if I put a capo in the second? Like that was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and it was very limited stuff.
Yeah.
It was like the most basic stuff that, you know, a guitar player would not usually waste his time teaching. But it was like revolutionary to me. It's like, oh shit, okay, if I just move this up one, maybe I could sing it. And then all of this coincided with COVID, and I was locked in here and just started like, that's all I do is play the piano or play guitar all day long.
Good for you.
And I would, usually the process was something would happen in that room in the morning, a dream or a thought or something that I read that would spark a word or a phrase, or, you know, Jim Harrison would say something about an eagle, and then that would lead me to something else that like ping pong back and forth with this Bill Callahan song. Like, so most of them start with one little nugget, and sometimes that's from something else. Sometimes it's like from an experience I have. There's a lot of songs that have, you know, are from conversations with friends. And then it would be, you know, as long as it took, come here at this kitchen table and, you know, just try to come up with a chord progression that worked. And then sometimes the songs would be 10 verses and I would whittle it down to 3.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, it was such a probably not, I didn't realize how untraditional it was until like Bucka Allen, Terry's son, came over to play piano on the record, and he's like, man, these progressions are not normal, and I didn't even know what that meant. And I don't think it's anything too obscure, but it's like, it's not like verse chorus bridge chorus type thing.
Right.
I just had to find chords that worked for my shitty voice, and that's how the songs were constructed.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, I love the way you described your morning, waking up and reading poetry or philosophy or something, because you talk a lot about influences with artists. And I think everything is an influence in a way, whether it's a good one or a bad one. You're either compelled by something and that drives you forward, or you're repelled by something and then that sparks an emotion as well. You know, so all of it is kind of fodder for your own expression, which is, I think, the real interesting magic of art in particular, is it's going to create some form of a jumping off point if it hits you in some way.
Totally. And I had someone sent me, I think Dan Malloy sent me this YouTube interview that Will Oldham had done. You know, Will Oldham from Bonnie Prince Billy. And
no. Writing it down.
Definitely, I mean, you can go down that rabbit hole for years. He's had bands from Palace Brothers, Palace Music, Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy, prolific. But he's in that world of like that drag city kind of hyper literate 90s world of David Berman, Silver Jews, Bill Callahan, Stephen Malcolmus, Will Oldham. But anyway, Will, incredible writer and singer, but essentially did this really, and is one of these kind of guys, like prior to social media, that, you know, everything was just so much more mysterious and interesting. Like, I don't think there was a picture of Will that surfaced for 10 years at one point. But he's, you know, a lot of these guys, Bill Callahan included, have just, I don't know if it's just them kind of finding some peace through marriage and kids, or just like having such an output where now they're kind of passing it forward or just having some fun with it. I don't know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
It could be, I think the quarantine has just changed everyone's perspective about how to treat their art or get it out there. But anyway, I don't know the context, but it was like an 1.5 hour long interview or like seminar essentially on songwriting.
Cool.
And he was so open about and giving on just like his process and the process, and like, you know, not speaking for other musicians, but just talking about, you know, I picked up this from this guy, like this was something from this guy's song that I use and turn it into mine. And You know, all of this chord progression, you know, giving people the permission, like, hey, if nothing's coming in your head, start off with someone else's song.
Yeah.
And eventually, with your own words and your own cadence, that will morph into your own thing.
Sure.
And from, you know, if you listen to 10 of Chris Christopherson songs, or me and Bobby McGee specifically, you can trace that back to a Mickey Newberry riff or a chord progression. That can be traced back to anything. So all of this was a revelation to me of someone who didn't know chord structure or didn't know songwriting structure, where a lot of the songs would start with a familiar melody in my head, but me being incompetent at the guitar, it just naturally morphed into my own thing. But Will, like, that was kind of a profound interview for me, and I'd encourage a lot of new or experienced songwriters to listen to it. But it's essentially kind of just dispelling the myth and the barrier to entry, and giving you permission, like, hey, you know, it's fucking 2021. There's not a lot of, like, you know, the ideas and thoughts that just totally come from a clean slate are few and far between. Right. But you can get to that place through stuff that exists, and there's like,
right.
So I think most people would be lying if there's not some direct reference to people they're influenced by in their art.
Right. Yeah, and I love that the genesis of it was that you wanted the song to bring to the campfire.
Well, the irony is, we haven't been to a fucking fire again.
You're like, guys, wait till we have another fire. I got a bunch of songs.
Well, that's what I sent the album out to the guys, like, hey, we haven't done this in 2 years, so this happened. Yeah. But the honest truth is, I wanted to write one good song to bring to the campfire. Amazing. And then it ended up writing 25, and 10 or 11 are on this album, and I'm recording the second one this week.
Oh, cool. Second album.
Yeah.
Good for you, man.
I thought it'd be funny to have my debut and follow-up album in the same year, and then like pull Willis out and Ramsey and never do it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of like, who knows when the floodgates are going to open back up with civilization, and I'll have to start traveling for work again. So I just like going to try to capitalize on it while it's, you know.
Yeah.
The iron's hot.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. I can't wait to hear it.
It's EDM.
Yeah. Yeah. That guy's got a real range.
Yeah. What is he gonna do next?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talked a little bit a second ago about the undulations, the emotional, the oscillation, this balance between pain and challenge, and also fun and humor. And coming to mind where you open with the line, "Pirate is just a cowboy with a boat," which is, to me, when I first heard that, I thought it was kind of funny line. You know, what is this going to be, kind of a playful song? And then the next line is, "A wish is just a prayer is, or a wish is just a prayer without hope. All I've known is gone. Old man won't remember my name. Can't remember my name." And just within a few lines, you're kind of picked up, and then you're dropped into this real serious place. And that's a talent, man. That's a poem, and it runs throughout it, and whatever you're going through, and you can sort of infer from it that you're going through some stuff, and the fact that you were willing and able to express it in such a sensitive way, without it being like you're walking on eggshells, was really, really nicely done. And I think any doubt or despair that exists within the songs is ultimately overcome and overshadowed by something larger and stronger that has carried you through. I mean, even the fact that you made the album dispels that question. I wonder if it's worth wondering at all, you know, because you are expressing your wonder through what you've created, what you cared to put the heart into creating, and that says everything. The final product says everything about, you know, this kind of relentlessness of trusting yourself through struggle. And, you have Cool Hand Luke on the wall. That to me is what that movie personifies, is that kind of like, fuck it, let's keep riding till the end. And I think that is such a beautiful emotion and energy that you captured in this album. And I think why ultimately I'm so drawn to it and will continue to be. So props, congrats. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I have a lot of respect for guys, towns but it's not cool to explain, the greats didn't explain what their songs were about.
Right.
But, I'm not that precious about it. There's no way and there's no need to tell you, like, all right, this line means this song is about this, but each song to me represents a story and a personal story for me. What it's about, how it was written it's like the film, so much of why I enjoy doing what I do is not necessarily the final product of these films. It's being, trapped on the side of a mountain or in a boat with your friends trying to navigate the storm. And watching a film is usually a memory of that experience. And so much about going back to Stoicism or whatever, it's like, it's all about the experience and the process. If I never released this album, I would have had the same benefits from it,
Sure.
But that song, I mean, you can look around this room and imagine how that, I was sitting right there having a conversation with Chris Malloy, and we were talking about all those things. I just wrote, kind of wrote a little tribute to him, and he was such a valuable resource and friend and ally, and kind of putting these together. I would send him every demo. And he'd be like, what, and he never said, like, change this or that, but he was really helpful. And that song, his trying to find those universal things is what I think, without explaining what a song is what the whole purpose is.
Sure.
The more specific and the more literal you are, the less chance you have of affecting someone who might benefit from it or might be interested in it.
Yeah.
Chris and I were going through similar things with our dads, and we had similar relationships with our dads. And his dad was a legend, and just a similar sort of, like, same sort of Texan type of dad that was no hugs, no love, but express it in just different ways. And it was like your work ethic, handshake. And we were just having one of those conversations. And he was dealing with it. My dad had been in the hospital asleep for 3 months. And, that song came out in one, like, very few songs, that I've written come out without, doing edits or
Sure.
changing it or trying to think of words. But that song, Chris said something about, pirates and cowboys, and it was out of context, but for what was on my mind, it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
And it was his dad, my dad. It was my world, his world. It was this sense, this, like you said, this Cool Hand Luke sort of philosophy of all of these things that are out of your control. You just have to keep moving, like that was the whole prison system, and Cool Hand Luke being imprisoned by these things that are out of your control. It's like, it's on you to shift that perspective and be that beacon. A pirate is just a cowboy with a boat. A wish is just a prayer my name. Feeling bad for feeling free. So much country left to see. So ride on, ride away. Ride on, ride away. Ride the streak for today. Morning is sacred as your name. Curse the wind, curse the rain. You can't wait all day for morning to have something to say. A bitter man casts the blame on an ocean indifferent to pain. So ride on, ride away. Ride on, ride away. Ride the streak for today. Only the road understands. A son on his own is a man. What's funny, there's a line, it's been really fun releasing this.
Yeah.
And like, it was terrifying because no one knew that I was doing it, aside from these group of, obviously Jesse, there's about 10 people that either knew that I was working on songs or I'd sent them demos, but I don't think anyone knew that I was making an album.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that are very confused by it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this like a new career? Like,
Yeah.
But also having to differentiate what they've known about me, like going back to football or films or Yeti or whatever. It's like, what? Like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, is this good?
Yeah.
Is this a joke? Is this like a Chris Gaines sort of thing? Like, so I think it's been fun, but it's been more fun having strangers like listen to him, like my friends, I think are probably 50-50 right now.
Yeah.
Like, they're either quiet or they don't know what to make of it, but it's been fun having other people reach out and like on Instagram or just emailing or friends showing it or, saying what it reminds them of or what it means to them or drawing their own experience through a song. And there's a few that have just been like, man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
When I wrote it, and there's a song called Mickey.
Sure.
And it was, there's a line in it, like at an ashtray at a funeral home that meant that was something very, specific for me.
Yeah.
And it meant something beyond that. But I've had so many people comment on that line and that song. Even Chris was like, is that about Mickey Dora? Dream songs we'll sing in our sleep. In the morning we'll find some relief. And nothing was all I could do to keep me wishing I could be just like you. But But you were never alone, like an ashtray at a funeral home. And miracles don't come around. And there's all these, like, it's guessing games of what these things are about. It never crossed my mind that was a possibility.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about specific images like that, symbolizing something bigger.
Totally.
That'll mean something different for everyone. Something, like you said, something universal. But yeah, I just love how you're kind of questioning throughout. You're questioning, bad luck will leave you lonely. I don't believe in luck no more. You're questioning these big ideas, but you're never giving up on him. And yeah, I'll be fine. The same song, I'll be fine today. In the whole experience of listening to it, you're kind of thinking, speak for myself, is where is he at? And that's where the honesty comes in, because we're always changing. If we're observing our life and our emotions, there are these ups and downs, and to be asking those big questions in a succinct, enjoyable to listen to song is not a small achievement in what it does for the listener. And so yeah, I'll say it again, great job, and cheers to you for making it happen. And the way you did, I think, is really cool. And for people to know that story, that you weren't always this aspiring musician. You didn't even write this album until your 30s, and that alone is inspiring, because it's like, why can't I do it? Why can't I try? Even if I'm only writing it for myself, like you said, the benefits are there just by trying. And in creating something, you're invited to really observe your experience in a way that maybe you wouldn't otherwise, if you're not trying to express it in a quality fashion.
And I don't know why I'm running. I don't remember you at all. Bad luck will leave you lonely. I don't believe in love no more. If this road goes on forever, then I'll just get out here and walk. And I'll be fine today.
You're dealing with loneliness, heartbreak, challenge. You mentioned your healthier father, like looking at it and expressing it. Tell me more about that experience, since it seems like it's your first time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been well, there's a few things. I mean, on one basic level, it started out as like, what do I want to do with my time?
Mm-hmm.
What is worthwhile way to get through this? And obviously we're getting through it with work and like just trying to survive a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that goes with it. But what do I like? One thing really struck me. One of the funnier memes was like, at the beginning, it was like how we thought of a pandemic was going to look like, and it was Viggo Mortensen from like The Road, like pushing a golf cart through a burn. It's like, but in reality, what it actually looks like, and it's like Stan from South Park just laying on the couch watching TV with his hands down his pants, like. And I was like, all right, I'm not gonna have the TV on during this. Here's something that like, what do I like? I respect people that can write good songs more like that. To me, that's the art form that has touched me the most, and is the most impossible to do. And like, so that became a really tangible goal. I remember I was like, my friend's a manager in town. I told Ryan, I was like, man, I want to write one good song.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. I want to write one good song with nothing more than a goal to be like, when my name's brought up and you're like, he wrote a good song.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's like, that was the goal. And that was enough. So that became like a way, like, how do I want to spend my time between like waking up and going to bed? I was like, I can deal with all these things that are important to me. I stayed at the hospital overnight on and off for a few weeks before we were kicked out, with a journal, and dealing with that, grappling through all of this addiction. Like, how do you stay sober during a pandemic? Like, I can tell you there's a lot of afternoons when you're trapped where heroin and pills and just getting loaded until it's over sounded pretty good. So it was an exercise in survival, really. Like, how do I end the day feeling productive, challenged, and exploring these things going on with me that I know if they're not explored will end in a total catastrophe.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely been there.
Yeah. Well, that's a segue. You've referenced sobriety, and I think that's another example of your story that will be, if you're willing to talk about it, would be inspirational for people to know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think different artists have different approaches to this, and I still haven't seen this as like a career or a job, or I don't even identify as an artist really. I know artists, and I'm not one. My ex-girlfriend was an artist, and I'm too like I haven't made the leap of faith yet, and I don't know if I have it in me personality-wise, but there's a difference of being creative and being an artist. But I say that because if you look through, if there's some thematic stuff going on with my songs, you can't disassociate that from sobriety or what I've gone through, or leaning on stoicism to get through that, or this kind of like the age-old stuff with relationships and family and your dad, becoming your dad, not becoming your dad, like these tough love things, the West, the visuals of what I've seen and where I've been. But sobriety, more than anything, has been responsible for so much of it, because so much of what my day-to-day efforts, what I think about, what I read, what I talk about, it's like is needed to get through it, so I don't call up a heroin dealer and die again. So a lot of the stuff, whether it's a line or like a subtle takeaway from a song, very clearly has to do with sobriety, or some of the principles or philosophies or literature that I've kind of latched onto to kind of help me gain a perspective and be a contributing member of society, where I wasn't, when I was. So the short story is, I love to drink, probably interfered with my football career, and had 3 DUIs when I was in my 20s, 3 different states. That really was never on the radar of like, oh, maybe I should slow down. But I mean, ever dating back from a football injury in high school, I had this love affair with pain pills, and it was just like instantly. I remember the first time I got a root canal. My mom came back 2 hours later after I was supposed to take my first dose, and like all 20 Vicodin were gone. And I was just like fucking on the couch, so happy, just like with Gatorade and ice cream, and I was like, this is what's been missing in my life. Like, I've never felt like who I am without on these drugs. And that became the quest for 10 years. And it's a a moving target, like, because they're not easy to get. They're expensive. They're not easy to get. So it's like, you know, it wasn't really that big of a problem just based on access for a long time. Until in Venice, when I was like 27 or 28, I moved in with a drug dealer unknowingly. He was a musician that dealt drugs on the side. And so access became not a problem.
Yeah.
And quickly, within a year and a half, I was spending every dollar I had, spending dollars I didn't have, you know, taking 40 or 50 Vicodin a day, and that turned into Oxycontin, and that turned into heroin over the course of 2 years.
Wow.
And no one knew. My girlfriend didn't really know. I worked every day. It's like a very secretive thing. Pills, you just keep them in your pocket, and you can kind of, you know, get through it without... I think people put the pieces together once I told them, like, oh yeah, you know, it's, you know, why this behavior or that behavior. But essentially at 29, I just got like so depressed, and there was no way out. Like, I tried a million times to do a cold turkey, and you're just sweating and shitting everywhere, and you know, the wind is painful.
Wow.
Like, your bones are just so fragile, and you're just a wreck. And I checked myself into rehab in Portland, like, made the call, booked the flight, did everything, then told everyone, called my parents, like, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I'm going to get sober, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
You're what? All my friends, like, no one knew. And it was the greatest 30 days. It was like the first 30 days. You know, there's no cell phones. It's the first time I've had clarity in a decade. And that was 8 years ago. And kind of just came out of that with just like a total new appreciation for life and perspective and appetite to do things, and just, you know, it was like started me on the path to like become your authentic self. And it hasn't been, you know, there's been a few detours in the last 8 years where it hasn't just been a smooth ride. And there's been like, oh, you know what? I was addicted to pills. Like, weed was never a problem. I'd try that. And then, you know, it takes about a month before you get back to what you're looking for. So that's been like, you know, and I do all the things. I do AA, I sponsor people. Very, like, not ashamed to say that that's been really instrumental in giving me this, like, foundation for just taking it, like, one day at a time. And it's like, you know, I mean, 99.9% of the time, it's like I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's been like the opportunities and the places and the things I've done because of it that I wouldn't have been able to do, loaded, has been remarkable.
Well, good for you, man. I mean, it seems like you have the fortitude to keep it going. And well, I can only imagine the ride that's been for you, and to come out of it in such a way, you know, endlessly admirable. So good on you.
Thanks. Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I know there's it's been tough with the quarantine and then stuff like this last week in Austin. It's been a tough time to get sober, you know. It's like there's no in-person meetings. Right. You know, getting to rehab is a nightmare. Like, all of this, I just have really felt for people who are struggling. And there's plenty of my friends who've, you know, are on the verge or in and out, and like we talk openly about it. It's like I'm pretty candid about my experience and what it's given me. But, you know, plenty of people don't need it, and, you know, it's quite a leap of faith to give it a shot. Yeah, certainly. And even if you're not going through it, for people that are going through it, I can only imagine how important it is to have stories like this out there. But even if people aren't dealing with it
as acutely, it's still an example of just dealing with struggle, coming out of a struggle with strength and direction and purpose and a belief in yourself. And those stories are always important, I think, for everyone. So, yeah, no, it's an incredible thing, and good for you for confronting it and for dealing with it in the way that you have.
Thanks, man.
The another thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is kind of related, I imagine, to your sense of strength or influence, inspiration. You seem to have through your music and your other work, seem to have a visceral connection to nature, or at least a conversation. I mean, in your songs, you're sort of consulting nature or conversing with nature. I mean, the album's called Talking to Mountains. Or, washing...
A little on the nose.
Washing away the pain, the river washing away the heartbreak.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, is there a better metaphor in life than a river? I mean, like, it's just, nature is poetic. I mean, look what happened this week. Like, there's nothing more mysterious and inspiring and humbling than nature. There's nothing as healing or cathartic or reflective than nature either. So it's like, yeah, whether you're, Thoreau or Jim Harrison or whoever, it's like, nature is one of those places where, like, I go to for extreme clarity, and you can hear your own thoughts.
Sure.
I lived in LA and Austin. It's not exactly like rural communities,
right.
But my job's been fortunately put me some pretty remote places, and just like the sight of a mountain and the metaphor of climbing up it or down it, or the same with the rivers. Like there's a line like in my upcoming album. There's like just the thought that you can never be in the same river twice. It's always moving, it's always changing, it's always like, and that's kind of like, that's not reflective of what we go through. It's like, it's one day at a time.
I love the out in the country you'll find the best. I'll find the best of me. I love that. But it's like, if you've experienced that hits the nail on the head for me. If you've had that feeling, I know what you mean. It's a beautiful feeling, and it's hard to put into words, and but it's worth paying attention to. It's worth trying to put into words.
Totally. And it's like, at the most basic level, I hope some of these films that we've done, like, encourage people to get out and see some of these things. How many people do we know that don't? Because it's like going to Europe or traveling anywhere, anything that can change your perspective and put you out of your normal routine and thinking. And there's just nothing like, I spent 2 months during the summer at my friend's place in Wheatland, Wyoming, and it was just like, incredible. Just the seeing bears cross the river through you, encountering rattlesnakes, forest fires, the weather, the wind, the sound, like, it's just like nature is the only thing that can connect you to the beginning of time. It's like, it's the only thing that's been constant through all of this, through all the change.
Right.
And it's maybe it's low hanging fruit, like, but if you listen to all the town songs that refer to mountains, or the Bill Callahan songs that refer to rivers, you realize that it's like inspiring to a lot of people.
For sure, and for a reason. Speaking of that, your other work, and you mentioned Lightning Hopkins. Have you ever seen Les Blank documentaries?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I, to your credit, watching some of your work, he came to mind, and the visuals. And a long time, I'm thinking like some of the scenes of the little kids running around, and let's talk a little bit about or whatever you're going to say there. But let's talk about your work in film.
Well, Les Blank. I mean, I remember that same trip to Rockport with JT. We watched a couple of those This Blues According to Lightning Hopkins.
Yeah.
JT loves Man's Limp Scum.
Oh my gosh, that one's amazing.
All those things are just so fucking incredible. I just rewatched A Poem as a Naked Person,
Sure.
the one on Leon Russell.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the greatest. And Jack, of course, Jack Sanders is the architect, artist, and long time. He had a connection to Les, and his son.
Oh wow.
Was out there making a documentary on. So they're trying to do a documentary of digging up Les Blank's body in Berkeley. That's what he wished for when he died. And so, like, all those worlds were connected, filming Jack stuff. And his son, he was out there when we were filming with Jack and through Alabama and Jack's weird world. He's very much connected. So, you know, putting a Lightning Hopkins song in Jack's film, or just some of the way it was edited and cut together and shot, I think was very much, you know, I think thinking of Jack and his appreciation, what just represented that
Wow.
feel, and Austin and that art, like that community. But
Wow, that's cool.
that's been the fun thing about my role at Yeti. You know, like I co-directed that one with a guy out of Colorado named Ben Knight, and Ben edited that. And, you know, Ben didn't know Jack. He didn't know Lightning Hop. He didn't know, like, him coming into this world that I was a part of and seeing his perspective was so interesting. And the collaboration of all these films has been the fun part for me. Because usually it's me overseeing a film with, you know, different director, Chris Malloy or Keith Malloy or, you know, Jimmy Chin, Renan Osterk, like all these, Greg Coes, Jeff Bednar, just like, it's working with directors from all over the country, all different style, all different point of view, all different way of shooting, all different DP. So I've learned so much in their different styles and had a lot of fun collaborating with someone, because, you know, I have my own sort of interests, and those aren't always right. You know, I have my own sense of humor and my own kind of view of the world. And it's been fun, you know, combining that with these other people who come from a you know, obscure surf film, you know, background. Jimmy Chin just won an Academy Award for Free Solo and has his own experiences that far transcend mine and from a totally different place of, you know, so it's been such a blessing, and I've learned so much, just seeing how these people work, being in an edit room, you know, working with them. I think that's why, if there's been any sort of kind of interest or success with the film, it's like there's all these different components that are from different worlds, telling about what's, you know, already a very unique world. You know, the subjects of these films, and then throw in, you know, music to it. It's a really hard thing to recreate. And I think, you know, if anything will keep us where we're at or doing what we do, is like, there's no real formula anyone can get a camera.
Right.
Anyone can go tell a story. But to me, what's interesting is throwing all of these people together who, you know, getting someone who doesn't know anything about fly fishing to come do one with JT, and vice versa on the surf film. You know, it's cool. Like you said, these films aren't about surfing or climbing. It's about humanity and this like universal truth. So I like doing that. Like, if I don't think I'd ever make a film if it was me with a camera going to film it and editing it. Like, I don't think I would. That doesn't necessarily sound that fun to me. Like, what's fun is the collaboration and the collective experience and adventure, and being in the trenches with these people that have totally different perspectives and you know, way of communicating that, because it blends these worlds and points of views into something that's totally unique. And you know, I think I carry that over with my album too. So many people touched, like, it was a, you know, it was my voice and my songs and my shitty guitar playing, but so many people touch that thing, you know, and you might not be able to tell, but it was, you know, between just bouncing songs off, you know, there's one of my good friends, Austin Leonard Jones is in Ojai. He's the best songwriters I know.
Yeah.
And it's just one of these guys that's never, he'll be like Blaze Foley. Yeah. Like in 50 years, someone will uncover the treasure chest and be like, holy fuck, who was this guy? Like, but he's not out there self-promoting. He's not out there spending a lot of money to do these tours. Like, he's just writing really good songs. Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to have him as an alibi and an editor, and I'll send him a song and I'll be like, anything here, you know, worth changing.
Yeah.
And he might change one word. That song Barfly that you're talking about, the original line was wondering who you are. You know?
Yeah.
Which is a very straight, you know, sentimental sort of like, nothing wrong with that line. Austin's like, you should change it to wondering who I are.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like, that's a fucking 100% better.
Yeah.
And it changes the whole thing.
Definitely.
It adds this Roger Miller element to it that's kind of self-deprecating and funny. Like, now you're put in this position of being drunk at a bar. Like, you know, you're not some sap. And like, he changed one word, and it, to me, that's the only reason the album's like, I wasn't completely convinced with that song until he did that.
Really?
Because I have, like, you know, and Jim Harrison has this quote too. He's like, him and Tom McGuane are best friends, you know, and Tom McGuane is like the trippy, you know, or he started out like kind of the Hunter S. Thompson of the outdoor world, you know, his books in Key West and some of these early Montana books are so out there and cynical and funny, and Jim Harrison's pretty much, you know, it's like, I'd rather be accused of being sentimental than cynical. And I think I have, even though I try not to be, like, I have that tendency to be more sentimental or hopeful than just totally ironic and cynical. And I think that's okay, because I think I've made that's been part of this 8-year journey of not being dark and cynical. And I know, like, David Berman or, you know, Austin or Jesse, like, I'll you know, there's probably lines that I didn't change that make them cringe because they're a little too down the middle. But we're truthful to kind of how I see things.
Yeah, and I think it's back to I think it's more interesting, it's more complex to be both cynical and sentimental. You know, it's kind of easy to be either.
Right.
But if you can do both, touch on both in the same short song, it becomes a bigger story. And I'm glad you pointed that line out, because when I first heard it, I was like, I didn't know if I heard it right. You know, and I've listened to songs a million times now, but it's like, where I went with that was, first of all, I thought it was so interesting, but also the grammar of it obviously is off, but it suggests that you're more than one person. You know, because it should be who we are, meaning there's more than one. But you say there's who I are is like, I is singular, but then R suggests plural.
Totally.
And which again, it's back to this: we're all a tapestry, and we change, and we weave through the undulations of our lives as we should, experiencing things in different ways as we go.
Totally.
And yeah, man.
Well, it fit perfect, because that was, to me, that's when I started writing. It's like, the song is about the disadvantages of being in your own head. Yeah. You know? And that your worst enemy is the 6 inches in between your ears. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like, that started with a quote from my dad, actually. He was visiting me in Venice when I was still living in Venice, and I've hung on to this forever. Mm-hmm. We were all at the beach, and he was out there in his fucking starched Wranglers and ostrich skin Lucchese's, sitting on a lawn chair with his arms behind his head, just like staring at the ocean and having a great time. And he, out of nowhere, he's like, you know, sometimes I like to sit here and think. And he looked at us, he's like, sometimes I like to just sit here.
I
And like
love
that's
that.
been like that's been a joke between me and my friends forever. And when I started writing songs, like what does that mean to me? Like is that, and I started writing one, and it was like this like, you know, Nashville finger picky thing that was gonna be a joke, like, you know, like a total John Prine song. But then it kind of like, you know, I tweaked the melody, and it became something totally different to me.
Yeah.
Based on, I can't remember what triggered it, but it finally, when I tweak something, it finally is like, all right, that's the beginning of this song. It's like about just being in your own head.
Yeah.
And the freedom of not thinking.
Sure.
Like that's what this whole thing is about. Like meditation, you know, stoicism. Like
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting you said that you weren't that attached to that song, because that one stuck out to me right away. You know, the neon sky is worthy of your secrets, and certain lines in that. But that opening line, I thought was profound and funny. You know, because sometimes I sit here and think, and that could go any direction. And then you nail it after that with sometimes I sit here, and it's like you're not taking yourself seriously. Maybe you're not having any profound thoughts, and that's such a relatable experience. And it's easy to be like, oh, a songwriter must be having constantly these breakthrough, profound realizations. But the fact that you say in those two lines that you don't is refreshingly sort of self-deprecating.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but I gotta give, you know, co-writing credit to my dad on that one.
Yeah, the wisdom. While we're on the song, and I mentioned earlier you know, maybe someday we'll meet when I get better. I love this speaks to the sort of relentless self-confidence in the face of despair, because it's, you know, you're suggesting that something's off, something's not right, maybe we'll not get better. And then when you go on that little ride of like, someday I'll have the guts to introduce myself, someday I'll look you in the eye with a country kind of confidence, and let the night speak for itself. It's just like that hit home big time for me. Is you know, you're kind of not believing in yourself, but then you kind of are. You do have this like very sort of unending confidence that maybe maybe something beautiful will happen.
Right.
And
if you can get out of your own way.
Yeah. I meant to ask Jesse, is that him on the vocal after that, Speak for Yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I was like,
that was another happy accident. He's like, hey, I kind of threw this in there. I hope you like it. And I was like, this is great. Speak for yourself. Like, right. You know, it's like another one of those. There's so many happy accidents, like going back to how this topic started, just the collaboration.
Yeah.
And I could not have done this without Jesse.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done it without Jesse, 100%. His harmonies are in there on almost every song.
Yeah.
Like masking the raw tragedy of my own voice.
Sure.
And it's like he's my Emmylou Harris that just totally saved me and protected me. Sometimes I sit here and think, sometimes I just sit here. Sometimes I sit here and drink. Wondering who I are. Wondering if we'll meet when I get better. Wondering if it's better not to wonder at all. The neon sky is worthy of your secrets. Barfly and lonely hearts will seek it. And the last bit of light, I'll beg the night to keep it. And one day I'll have the guts to introduce myself. And one day I'll look you in the eye with a country kind of confidence. One day I'll let the night speak for itself. Sometimes I sit here and think, sometimes I just sit here. Same thing with Austin. There's, that's not the only word he changed. And the last song on the album, he wrote.
Oh, yeah.
Life Gone Dim.
Sure, I was going to ask about that too.
I woke up one day and there was an MP3 from him with that song. He goes, "I wrote you a song."
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." I was like, "You're going to put it on your album, blah, blah, blah." He's like, No. I wrote you a song. You need to put it on this album."
Nice.
And I called Jesse. He's like, "What does this mean?" He goes, "Dude, that's kind of like you have to do it. It's, that's a compliment."
Yeah.
And then, I looked. Then I started thinking. I was like, "Wait, am I a depressed cowboy for all?" Then I started thinking about the song, and then I was like, "I love this song." Yeah. And I was like, "I have to." We recorded everything. Then we went back into Lockhart to record that one song.
Cool. And
Austin is the one. He's playing the farfisa at the beginning, like this little funny keyboard thing, and that's him doing the spoken word at the end.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Yeah, I love. It's funny you mentioned that he was sort of a protector, because back to that line in Barfly, "Speak for yourself." He has such a kind of a ghostly, angelic feel to his songs and to his person, and I thought that him coming in on that vocal is almost like having an angel on your shoulder, because it's not your voice, it's coming out of nowhere. Totally. And it's this ethereal sound.
Yeah.
And then he goes away, and it's really beautiful and an interesting choice, and yeah, it speaks to the potential of collaboration. Have somebody else come in with something that you couldn't have thought of yourself necessarily.
Dude, the prettiest part of the whole album, maybe the only pretty part, I don't think pretty's gonna be. And if this thing ever gets reviewed, I don't think pretty's gonna be an adjective thrown out there. But there's a part in Tortilla Moon, going back to the collaborative thing, and all these are just stories and experiences. Like me and Jesse, there's some more pictures over there. We went to Chihuahua, down to Copper Canyon in Creel, did a pack trip for a week. And I had started one in my head just on a horse, and it was again, one of these things that maybe was a little sentimental, but it was from the perspective of a family in Mexico trying to get to the border. This was happening when all of they were tearing up families, and you didn't know where your kids was, and we've been going hunting on the border forever. So I've given out bottles of water,
Yeah,
canned
yeah.
foods. Like I've seen
Yeah.
I've seen it and have walked into deer blinds with them sleeping in it. So it's like I have a soft spot in my heart for what they go through.
Yeah.
And it was crushing the whole wall thing and just thinking of families being separated. So the song in my mind started out as like this love letter from a husband who'd sent his wife and kid ahead of him, you know? And of course it was like 7 or 8 verses long, and it's like going to be another one of these that Terry would have had some thoughts on. And but I liked it. There were some good verses, and it started like that painting right there is Tortilla Moon.
Oh, cool.
Going back to Jack as one of his like staples in his art show. So I was like,
cool.
man, that's like, I want to write a song for Jack, and like, you know, so that's like, I wanted to incorporate that somehow. And I just always I love art or songs. Same thing with Terry. Like I love thinking like when something's endearing is when like I love the thought of Jack being high out at the Long Time or in Marfa or somewhere, and it's just been like, that moon does kind of look like a tortilla. And then you know, like, or Terry, some of his lines, like I just love thinking about Terry making himself laugh in the studio. You know, so it's like that was. Jack is very much responsible for that, but it took part in a trip down to Mexico and came back, sent it to Jesse, and Jesse's like, it was the first song I sent to Jesse that he responded to. And he's like, this is good. And not only did he respond to it, he covered it. Yeah. And he was going to put it on his album.
Oh, wow.
But he took out 3 verses and added one of his own, which totally made the song better.
Before the end of the chorus.
Yeah, so it was like a fun back and forth. So he did that. I was like, well, what about this? And then we tweaked it some more, and then I changed the chords. So it became very much like a co-write situation with the song that I started. But what I started out saying is there's a part in that song that's just instrumental, and it's just Jesse doing these coyote howls and some whistles, and then Odessa Jorgensen playing violin over it. And it's just like, it's the prettiest thing I've ever heard.
It's beautiful.
And I had nothing to do with it. Walking through Ocotillo, the moon looks like a tortilla. It's shining so bright in the desert tonight, and I'm wondering if I'm ever gonna see you. So it's been fun, like, going full circle with Jesse. Him living on my couch, me trying to manage him, me helping out any way I can for being his biggest advocate and fan. Using him in all my Yeti stuff. For him kind of stepping up and not being embarrassed that I'm trying to do this. And take it serious and make these songs good, because I 100% wouldn't have done it if he wasn't involved.
Wow, that's really, really cool. Yeah, you referenced, speaking of Tortilla Moon and Friends and Terry Allen, it reminded me of today's rainbow is tomorrow's tamale.
Exactly.
Like, what? It's just, oh man. And in the spoken word, that is such a cool way to end it, because again, you didn't do anything like that in the other songs, and all of a sudden it's this deep, getting hard to see the road from, like, sounds like John Wayne or something, or Johnny Cash.
He did that in one take. So he went, the other significant player in the album was my friend Todd Hannigan, who scored all of Chris Malone, all of those surf films, Thicker Than Water, a lot of stuff we did with Farm League and Patagonia. And then, if Jesse hasn't scored something for me, it's been Todd. It's been very much 50-50, those two, and Will Patterson, who mastered the album. But Todd was in Ojai, and we were mixing it over Zoom, because it was during all this bullshit. And Austin lives in Ojai. And Austin came, I was like, Austin, if I record the song, you have to be in it in some capacity. I was like, I want you to do, Jerry Jeff Walker had just passed away. I was like, I want to do like a Jerry Jeff sort of ending, and go to Todd's and do a spoken word. And like Austin went to the dentist and then went to Todd's and did it in one take. He's like, all right.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Well
Nothing
done.
written.
Yeah. I also love how you left the laugh in there. You know, that's such a nice way to end it.
Oh, I'm going to love when Jesse hears that part, because that was like a long debate.
Oh, really? Well, for what it's worth, I appreciate it. It's kind of it's a poetic touch to the end, because it's back to what we've been talking about. It's like all this stuff happens, all this pain, this tribulation and challenge, and then it's kind of like, it's all good.
That's the whole point of the album, is like, life is dim, but you just have to fucking laugh about it sometimes.
Yeah, that was nice. It was a nice way to go. Maybe we could talk a little bit, if you're willing, about the Terry Allen documentary.
Yeah.
Which we've talked a little bit about, but tell me about that experience and kind of what brought you to it and what it was like working with him and telling that story, because you did it so well. And I think sharing that story, and I'm biased because I'm a fan of his, but he wasn't well known. He's still not, but you could find his music, or you could tell someone to listen to his music, but the film opens up his character in a way that maybe you wouldn't infer necessarily just from hearing his songs.
Yeah, the Terry film came about kind of accidentally, it started out something totally different, and it was, so I'd met Terry through Ryan Bingham. I'd met Ryan. I pretty much cold called Ryan when I started at Yeti. Familiar, fan of his music, familiar of his story a little bit. Just thinking like, hey, this is a story I want to tell that we would have permission to do, because he was a bull rider. He surfs. He bow hunts, and he's an incredible songwriter. I was like, this would be one that's interests me. That's like dynamic and. Yep. And picked up Ryan one day. The first time we met, took him up to the Hollister Ranch to go meet the Malloys and go surf. And from there on, it was just kind of like all of us were like, all right, we all come from similar worlds, and just became friends and hung out for a little bit. And then ultimately developed the idea to do this series, Midnight Hour, with Ryan as the host. Yep. And it was a songwriting series, each like about 30-minute episodes, and the basic idea was Ryan and another musician to get together, play songs, swap stories about the songs, but also their lives, and try to kind of get a little bit of each of their lives come through in context of these songs that they play. And the first one that Ryan recommended doing was Terry Allen, which was like music to my ears, because Ryan may or may not have known. I can't remember if we had talked about it at this point, but Terry had been on my record player for at least 2 years solid. Did not remove Juarez from the record player for 2 years. No one else at Yeti knew who he was, but like I was like, yes, we're doing this. And so we shot for a day or two in Topanga at Ryan's, and then a couple days in Santa Fe at Terry's for Midnight Hour with Keith Malloy and his company directing the series. And me and Terry I think we became, we hit it off. And he has family in Austin. He has a place in Austin. We started to just kind of stay in touch and see each other, and I think he liked how the film turned out with him and Ryan. And there was a renewed interest in Terry once Paradise of Bachelors re-released Juarez and Lubbock on everything, especially with our generation, younger generation, probably hearing it for the first time. I remember Robert O'Keefe covering Amarillo Highway growing up, but that was my only context of who Terry Allen was until they reissued those. So he started playing these shows at the Paramount once a year with what he calls the Panhandle Mystery Band. And, his joke's like, the mystery is who's not in it, or who, like, so it can consist of anyone from Joe Ely to Ryan Bingham to, Charlie Sexton, David Byrne, all these people. But he called me after that. He's like, hey, I was talking with Ryan, and we think it'd be cool to film this, just do a little concert video. David Byrne will be there, Joe Ely, Bingham, Lloyd Maines.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, cool. And he's like, my friend from Houston, he's got some money, he's going to pay for it, just put together a budget. I was like, great.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to do something outside of, Yeti. It's going to shoot on the weekend. And cut to, like, a few months later, I have the crew lined up. Essentially, the money guy disappeared.
Oops.
I don't think you realize how expensive it is to make film was, or I don't know what happened. I never got that answer, but we were kind of committed. We love Terry. We're like, all right, we'll just film the concert. And Terry's, I think, vision was just to do a concert DVD, which, I don't think very many people watch concert DVDs anymore, if they ever did. It's hard enough to get, someone to watch a Rolling Stones concert, just music, much less an obscure kind of artist such as Terry. So I kind of had to subtly be like, Terry, what if it was clear I was not going to be able to make like a Searching for Sugar Man documentary with no budget or what Terry was willing to do, but I was like, we should maybe do a little more than just a concert film. And luckily I have like really good friends and people that I've worked with over the years that were down to contribute, because there really wasn't much or any money to dole out. And it was guys that I'd been working on these Yeti films with that came, and we had 6 camera operators shoot the show, and then handful of guys rotated to shoot the rehearsals. And then we just kept on kind of piecing it together. Did an interview with Terry down the street at Liz Lambert's house at her piano in Austin. And then would just like pick one guy at a time to kind of do an interview. And we were editing a different project in Santa Barbara when David Byrne was rolling through playing at the Santa Barbara Bowl. So Terry connected me to him, and we got an interview with him. Yeah. And I was really trying, to me it became like, I want this to be a postcard explaining who Terry is to someone who hadn't heard him. This is not going to be his life story. This is not going to be some, Academy Award-winning sort of expose. For a few reasons. Terry's life, he didn't have that Searching for Sugar Man story. He didn't have this, down-and-out junkie, sort of self-destructive poet thing like Towns did. Like, he's been married since he was 18 to the same woman, has 2 kids that he's close with, and people love him. He's a good guy. But what I couldn't get anyone, everyone was so close to it, whether it's Joe Ely or Lloyd Maines, Charlie, I kept on asking the question, like, how would you describe Terry to someone who hadn't heard it? And I was like, well, it's just pretty good, they're so familiar with him, and it's so, they couldn't put into words how unique his music was. And I remember leaving the David Byrne interview just crushed, because he didn't say, he was like, it's not for everyone. It was just such a, and he was just like socially so awkward, like dropped his microphone after 10 minutes and just like stumbled out of the door, like no goodbye, no handshake. I remember calling Joe Harvey, like, oh, what did I say? Like, he was so mean to me. She's like, that motherfucker. I've told David so many times how to, interact with people. He, like, she said, like, we're on the phone all the time, and he just hangs up. If he's done talking, she's like, you can't do that. You have to say goodbye and wait for the. So it was just like, it probably took a year to kind of piece all that together. And then you get in the edit room, you're like, man, we still haven't really explained his music or art. So we got JT Van Zandt and Evan Voiles, Kiki Smith, an artist. Like, James Sullivan was huge. He's a writer for Rolling Stones. I had done a couple pieces on him. To slowly just try to like frame up, like if I were to get, I probably try to tell a million people about Terry. And like, oh, what's he like? I was like, I can't explain it. Just drive from here to Durango and listen to it and then call me. So I was trying to have someone explain that, and then have these songs in between to kind of give that context. Is what the song ended up, or what the film ended up being. And I don't know, it's an hour long. It's part concert film. it gives you context of, I think, the three elements of Terry's music: his art, his family, that make him who he is. And it's lighthearted but informative. But to me, it was just like important to tell people who he was, because he's so important to me. And I think the main thing, and this is what, as bummed as I was with the interview, like having David Byrne from Talking Heads say, this guy has it figured out with his family, and like all of us are like, look at him, like, how does he doing that? Like that became the heart of the film. It's like, you know, he's still together with Joe Harvey.
And I think having those other folks try to, even if they can't put their finger on it, try to say whatever they can say about his work. You know, David Byrne included, you know, he said, I'd probably just show them some of his songs and tell me what they think. And you know, maybe that's not what you were hoping to hear, but it does speak to the fact that it's really hard to put your finger on, but you know it when you see it. It's something there. And maybe we don't need a succinct description of it, but I really liked how you had multiple perspectives on people trying. And the Rolling Stones guy, sorry, I forgot his name.
James Sullivan.
Yeah, I appreciated what he said. Was kind of like, if he didn't inspire you to start a band, he inspired you to live a life of art. And that, I thought that hit home, that did hit home for me, because Terry Allen has inspired me to live in a way more deeply than I had been previously, and given me this sense of confidence in whatever weird creative thing I ever choose to do, even if it's just the way I live, you know. And I thought that little point that he made was cool.
Well, totally. Yeah. And I'm in, you know, going back to with talking with Mountain, I'm in the same boat, and it was really cool to come full circle. A week ago, I emailed James Sullivan. I was like, hey, remember what you said about the 1,000 people that got a Terry album?
Yeah.
Made one of their own? I was like, here's mine.
Nice.
And his son plays piano on it.
Cool.
And, you know, one of the songs, and James was like, that's so cool.
Yeah, I love that, man. Well, it was a great film. I've been spreading the word about your album and about your other work as well, and we'll continue to do my measly part at that.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You keep on doing what you're doing, and these people, like talking to folks who have different points of view and experiences. I think people really appreciate listening and learning, and you know, you're affecting more people than you know.
Thanks, man. Anything else you'd like to add?
You know, no, man.
Yeah.
You can check out, I mean, the doc, I don't know if we said the documentary's name is Everything for All Reasons.
Right, thanks.
On iTunes, Amazon, any place you can rent.
Yeah.
No, I just appreciate taking the time. It's still odd, you know, I'm usually in your seat asking the questions.
Yeah.
And this has been such an insular project, this album. It just feels odd talking about it. But I'd be lying if it's not fun to finally, like, you know, realize that people have heard a song.
Yeah. Heck yeah, man. Well, I certainly have heard them, and I'll continue to hear them and share them. And thank you for letting me come over and sort of unsolicitedly try to, you know, break into your world a little bit and understand who you are. And I think your fans and anyone else will find this fun to listen to.
My fans. Hi, Mom.
Hey, that's not a small thing.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But yeah, man, all the best to you, and congratulations again. And this is going to be the year.
This is going to be the year.
I can feel it. Yeah, man.
This is going to be the year. I can feel it.
That's it. That was Scott Ballew, talented musician and filmmaker. Great guy. Scott Ballew. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Check out Scott's work, Talking to Mountains album, Everything for All Reasons, documentary on Terry Allen, and the array of film work he's done for Yeti. And sounds like more music on the horizon out of Scott, so keep your eyes and ears out. Thank you again for tuning back into the Jalapeno Podcast. This is Ty, your host, and until next time, be well.
1, 2, 3, 4. been flipping through the almanac, trying to get my prescriptions back. I've been looking to the animals, get myself under control, asking questions to a river bend. How long until this river ends? What's the station to cross? Lost in a life gone dim. Who's to know and who's to say when we get to see a better day? There's a shadow hovering over the grass on the backs of the cattle I pass, running straight into a centerfold. Mind I never really got a hold. It's getting hard to tell the road from rim, riding in a life gone dim.
Getting hard to tell the road from rim, edging closer to a life gone dim. I'm gonna give up, I just don't know when. Crash course into a life gone dim.